It was a project that took place last year and the year before. It lasted about 2 years, coordinated by Motherwell College, who at the time ran just over half of the learning facilities in Scottish prisons. It's part of an inspired fund, Scottish Arts Council, Creative Scotland Fund, working with 7 organisations across 7 national cultural organisations in 5 different prisons. These are Kirsten's slides, so I'll just pick out the interesting bits before I get to mine. Scotland imprisons more of its people than many other places in Europe. Prison population has increased every year of this century, projected to reach 8,700 inmates by 2016. Increased use of prisons is the result of using it for those who are troubled and troubling rather than dangerous. Prisons draw their inmates from the least well-off communities, and high prison populations do not reduce crime. They're more likely to create pressures that drive reoffending than reduce it. So the idea of the project was to kind of tackle that to see if we could do anything about people's reoffending through arts provision. The project was evaluated by academics from Strathclyde, Edinburgh University, and somewhere else. There was a team of academics who created a report, interviewed people prior to the project starting, during the project, and after the project to see how they'd changed over the course of it. And this included interviewing the artists that were involved, interviewing all the workers that were involved, interviewing the learning centre staff, and ourselves, and the prisoners. So there's 9 offender outcomes that Scottish Prison Service use and Motherwell College use when they're setting up their learning programmes, and that's these ones here. So reduced or stabilised substance misuse, improved literacy skills, employability prospects increased, maintained or improved relationships with families, peers and community, ability to access community support, ability to access suitable accommodation, ability to live independently if they choose, improvements in attitudes or behaviour which lead to offending, and greater acceptance of responsibility and understanding of the impact of their offending on victims. Obviously, we weren't going to help folk find houses or necessarily be able to give them access to much community support, and these projects are quite short-term projects. That's the curriculum that Motherwell do. So the partners in the Inspiring Change project, it was Motherwell College were leading it and coordinating it. There was the Scottish Prison Service, Scottish Opera, Scottish Chamber Orchestra, Scottish Ensemble, National Youth Theatre, Traverse, Citizens, National Galleries of Scotland, and Edinburgh, Strathclyde and Glasgow universities. We had it was 5 pilot prisons. We had a 2-year run-in. It took up about 2 years of time to develop the project, which meant that we all got to meet in situations similar to this. There would be everyone that was involved, from the artists that National Gallery that we commissioned to work on the projects, to people within the prisons, some of the warders, the guards and things were there, who maybe didn't have much access to arts themselves, who were going to be involved in taking the prisoners from their cell to the activities. So it took about 1.5 years maybe of discussions, working out what projects were going to suit what prison. It was a £300,000 project. The National Galleries part of that we're going to speak to, I think it ended up being 45 grand that we got for that. And then myself and my manager, who's part-time, we worked on it for 1.5 years basically, without doing much else in between. So yeah, there we go. That's Kirsten's slide. Right, so I'll tell you about our bit. The Outreach programme at National Galleries in Scotland has a kind of national remit. We try and take work from the National Galleries collection to people that maybe can't get to it. That's the kind of general thinking of it. So we're not often allowed to take Rembrandts off the wall and wander around Clydebank with them or anything, so we normally work with reproductions and photographs. With the Mirrors project, we used some of these works. We decided, because the National Portrait Gallery was undergoing a refurbishment at the time, that we would focus on portraits, and we would focus on self-portraits, because we figured that if we asked people to start looking at themselves and really seriously looking at themselves over a prolonged period of time, quite intensively, and we tell them that we're going to take the things that you produce, your images of yourself, and we're going to show them to other people that have maybe never seen you, I've maybe never even came across, I've never met an offender, never ever worked with somebody that has done something terrible in the past, and we figured that would maybe start to address some of these offender outcomes, like their improvements in their attitudes, which leads to offending, their acceptance of their responsibility and understanding of that impact. Oh, sorry. And maintained or improved relationships with their family and community, and that we were giving them an opportunity to. We're going to create an exhibition at the end of this. It's going to be in the National Galleries of Scotland. You might not be able to get to it yourself, but you can tell people about it, and it's going to be up there for a while. We're going to send you a load of invites. You can invite your friends, your family. They can have something that maybe they've not had anything, they've not felt proud of you for anything in the past, but here's maybe something that you can point them towards. So I didn't tell you about the 5 prisons. The 5 prisons we worked in was Barlinnie, which deals with quite short-term offences, folk that are on remand, Shotts, long-term offenders, Polmont Young Offenders Institute, so it's mostly folk under 21, I think, 21, 22. Greenock, which has a women's wing. We were initially going to be working in Cortonvale as well, but it was Carnegie College that managed that learning centre, and they pulled out of the project fairly early on. But sorry, I was getting distracted with this. So Greenock has a women's wing because Cortonvale's full, basically. So there are women held in a mixed prison in Greenock, and the other one was Castle Huntly, which is the open estate prison, where people go at the end of their sentences, and they'll maybe be in the prison for 2-3 weeks, and they'll get a week out, and then they'll be back in prison again. And it is an open prison. They're not locked up most of the time, I don't think. When you go in, it's the prisoners themselves that are operating the desks and things, and you go and speak to them. I don't know. So it was very different categories of prisoner. It was very different types of people, and they're all like wee towns. They're like their own wee town. They have their own rules of how they operate. None of them seem to follow. There is overarching guidelines, but a lot of those guidelines kind of seem to go out the window in one place, and they seem to focus on them a wee bit more in others. I'll go into them in a wee bit more detail. I've got lots of pictures, which I will try my best to describe, but if I'm not doing it very well, I apologise. So, work from the collection that we thought we would focus on. This is an image by a Scottish artist, probably one of the most famous living Scottish artists, or maybe not famous, but financially successful, is a guy, Douglas Gordon, and this is a piece called Monster Reborn, I think. It's a revisiting of something else, and basically self-portrait of himself standing staring at the camera. Next to it, it's himself with sellotape all over his face. So what we would do, we would take these images in, and we would just start a discussion with the group about the reasonings behind it. Second image, Cindy Sherman, an American photographer who uses herself in lots of work. She creates these kind of alter egos based on some notion of her own identity or other people's identity. Ken Curry painting of the Oncologists, which is up in the new portrait gallery. These are guys who work all their days on trying to find a cure for cancer. So we would spend a lot of time studying different images and just trying to get them to maybe just to to talk about them and see how those artists have represented themselves or have represented other people and how they could perhaps do the same thing. It's a Rembrandt self-portrait when he's a fairly old man. George Gross, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. It's called Toads of Property. This is a cartoon showing some lovely gentlemen in front of their factory with piles of cash in front of them, and the poor and disabled in the background. It's an image by an artist called Francesca Woodman. It's a self-portrait, and there's quite a tragic story behind Francesca Woodman in that she ended her life at a fairly young age, which ended up coming out in the discussions, especially with the women's groups, but we didn't focus on it. We didn't choose it for that reason. We didn't focus on it, but when we showed that image in particular, the amount of people that can read the tragedy in that image before you tell them anything about it, it's quite remarkable. This is a Thomas Annan photograph of a close, I think it's Salt Market Close, and a David Shrigley piece, Imagine the Green is Red. It's a wee red square with text on it on a area of grass. So hopefully when I show you the images, well, you can't see them very well on there. Anyway, when I show you the images, you can maybe see some of the links that people have made by themselves in the portraits that they produced. So Open Estate, Castle Huntly, worked with an artist called Finn McRae, who's a photographer. Because people were getting out for short periods of time and they were starting to think about home, Finn came up with the idea of looking at images like the Francesca Woodman, like the Thomas Annan one, and said, right, I want you to create a portrait of home. We're going to build pinhole cameras. So they constructed pinhole cameras that you get one shot of using, and it takes, I think the ones that they created, it was a 4-minute exposure or something that they were asking people to do. So they were going out and they were having to constructing the cameras in the prison, going home, and then really having to think, right, I've only got one shot to take this image. Of course they did it the first time. They've only got one shot to take this image. Better make it count. Some of them had a couple of shots because the camera's broken. They had to come back and do it again. But that's beside the point. The next one of someone visiting his mother's grave. I don't know what else I can say about that one, to be honest. Some of the quotes we got from people were quite powerful, so I've intersected them with some of the images. It taught me how to see my life from the outside. So this is one of the main things we were trying to get people to do, is to just consider themselves in another way. Here's the last piece called Sunset. It's a man sitting on a ridge, kind of foggy-looking, sunny day. We had a church group wanted to show these ones because they saw lots of religious overtones in them, about redemption. I don't know. HMP Berlini, we worked with an artist called Kevin Reid, and they decided, looking at the George Gross work and some other kind of sketches, that they were going to produce a graphic novel, a series of comic strips based on the experiences of their experiences. So here we have a signpost with 6 different nowheres, signs leading to nowhere. Feels like I'm getting nowhere. There's an image. If anyone wants the PDF of the comic strip, if you give me your email address, I can send you it. This is one of the quotes from the participants. We're getting to do real art. I can imagine trying to make a living doing this. At least he can do it. Okay, some folk find it a bit difficult. Shots, we worked with Robin Bailey, my manager, went into Shots to work with an already established art group, the art class. They were there every I think they were there twice a week. and they had a range of materials that they could access. We also worked with a filmmaker called Lou McLaughlin, who went in and filmed this, and the film is available to watch on the National Gallery's website. It doesn't have subtitles along the bottom or anything like that, so and keeping with the conference, I'll go back and see if we can do that. This is quite a horrific kind of Hieronymus Bosch style piece that is probably the most disturbing piece of art I've ever seen in my life. If you look at it closely, it's got probably some really, really dark, horrific imagery in it. So you might not want to look at it closely. This is another self-portrait with the, it's a face made up of song lyrics, the kind of song lyrics that he felt really affected him, and kind of reverberated around his head. Here's this. This is one of the killer quotes. For the first time, I've been able to look at myself and realise how I've led my life. So it's about that kind of re-examining. This is a piece called Doppelganger. It's an oil painting of a guy. The statement that he made to go with this was that sometimes thinks that maybe in the concept of doppelgangers, maybe he's the evil twin and there's a good version of him kind of running around somewhere. So this is his good version of himself. Pullman Young Offenders, it was myself and an artist called Fraser Gray that worked in Pullman with the young guys, and we worked with about 20 of them. We were asking them to draw themselves, and we were going to create life-size cutouts of themselves, cartoon-style life-size cutouts of themselves. A lot of them found this very difficult, especially when it came to looking at their face and drawing their face, and we ended up with a whole session of headless portraits that were later covered up by masks. This is one, what me and Fraser were trying to get them to do, and it didn't work with all cases. Like I'm not saying that we've cured all these folk and they're not going to go out and do horrific things in the past, but was to try and get them to think about themselves outside the prison. They're going to get out at some point, so we want them to look at how maybe they're going to be represented. This guy wanted himself to be represented with a Staffordshire Bull Terrier for a face tattoos down his arms in a fairly threatening pose. So I'm not saying that we've cured him of anything. I don't know how well he considered. I don't know. It's quite a dark image. Here's a haiku that one of them wrote, which went inside the hood of his piece. He made this life-size piece, and the Asbo, the haiku was in his head. Here stands a wee Ned, aggressive Asbo advert, nae good in your eyes. This another image of one of the life-size cutouts coming home in a not too confident manner. So we discussed. Oh, you can't see it very well, but we discussed where we were going to take their versions of themselves and where we were going to place them and why we should place them there. And then when we did it, we took them back in and discussed it with them again. And here's another one with someone with their inside self and their outside self, using a bit of wire fence to a grey kind of ginger version of himself behind the fence, and then a brightly coloured, slightly happier, although still slightly threatening version of himself outside the prison as well. The young offenders were a wee bit harder to work with than the rest of them in terms of them being ready to think about themselves, and especially within a group setting. You can't really give too much of yourself away when you're in those kind of settings. Greenock, how much time have I got left, by the way? About a minute, all right, okay. Greenock, we work with women Looking at the Francesca Woodman images to begin with, this is a series of kind of Francesca Woodman-like images that they played around with within the prison. We got use of the painter and decorator studio. They've got this studio in Greenock where folk paste up these wee booths and just practice all their painting and decorating in them. We took a photographer, Craig McLean, and a makeup artist, Heather Chan, into the prison, and we asked the women to create alter egos, kind of hyper-real versions of themselves. We were warned that we probably shouldn't ask them to explore themselves too much in the prison, because the prison services don't have the power or the staff or the ability to deal with a lot of issues that come out, especially when women are going through these places at quite a high rate. So they're maybe in for 4 months, 5 months, 3 months. There's a very high rate of self-harm, and we didn't want to provoke a kind of adverse reaction in these women. It's a version of one of the participants as Joker. This is Fashion Victim, this one's called. This is a woman lying on her back, surrounded by fashion bags, with a mask on, and the quote that went with that. We thought, when we first started talking about it, we were like, oh, it's like you've shopped till you drop. And she's like, no, it's like I've gone out, I've spent housekeeping, and my man's knocked me out, which shows you the difference of opinion of where people's headspace is, I suppose. And this is a piece called Angel, and that's of a woman who is severely disabled, is about the mental age of, I don't know, an 8-year-old or something. She's 21, she's had 34 convictions, and her support network is the women that she knows in prison, so she just goes in and out. Very, very grim situation. The exhibition, I'll be very quick, I know I've ran over time. We showed the exhibition in the National Galleries of Scotland. We had about 60,000 folk went through the door. We extended its run by a couple of months. Here's some of the quotes from people that saw it. This was an opportunity for people who maybe don't have access to, or don't come across people from poorer areas, National Galleries of Scotland. The general flow of people are normally from, well, you know who the general flow of people to the National Galleries are. I'm deeply touched by the honesty, the powerful yearning for freedom, the grief over time lost and opportunities wasted. We all have dark sides and our bright side. We all wear masks to conceal our brokenness. There's often a perception that criminals are bad through and through. Young offenders in particular are seen as having no inner life, no capacity for self-reflection and change. This exhibition challenges that view. It made me consider that the discomfort that I may experience if I was talking to an offender. It will take me a long time to change my opinion, having considered this, if indeed change it at all. I think that opens your mind to exploring a different side to offenders rather than defining them by the crimes they've committed. This work shows how important family bonds are how the criminal justice system should focus more on offenders as members of families. I think that many people see offenders as people who do not know how to contribute to society other than through crime. This exhibition gives a chance to reconsider and reflect on how important self-expression is to all. That's us. If anybody's got any questions, I'll take them at some other point because we've run out of time.